I think let's make a start. Welcome, everyone. My name is Professor Washington Ochieng. I am Executive Director of the Center for Systems Engineering and Innovation, CSCI, at Imperial College London. And I'm co-hosting this event together with the center's co-directors, Dr. Ana Midžić and Professor Jennifer White. We are honored and very excited to have you with us to celebrate the publication of our 10-year report, which also includes our strategy for the next 10 years, which we refer to as Vision 2030 or 2030 Vision. To introduce the report, we have an exciting program for you this evening. We will start by hearing from Dr. Midžić about some of the highlights from the report and our thinking in terms of how we take the work forward. Anna's presentation will be followed by a panel discussion, which will be chaired by Professor Jennifer White. And today we are very delighted to have with us on the panel Professor Alan Penn, who is our Chief Scientific Advisor at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government in the UK. He also is a professor in architectural and urban computing at UCL. Also joining us is Professor Dragan Zavic, who is a Chief Executive Officer, KWR Water Research Institute. So before I hand over to Anna, let me just go through some housekeeping matters. Please add your questions using the Q&A function and keep your microphones and videos off when you're not speaking. We will ask some of the questions, obviously directly from the Q&A, but it may also be that some participants may want to actually ask questions in person. Please note that this session is being recorded, but it is not being broadcast. We will use the audio for podcast and potentially some clips, but with the agreement of the speakers. If you're not happy to be on video, then please keep your video off. I've been told to say that you should feel free to live tweet from this event. And in doing so, please tag us at CSCI_Imperial using the hashtag CSCI2030. Finally, there's a team of us working behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly, but please do bear with us just in case a frog kind of finds its way into the system. We will do our best to be able to resume activities. So without further ado, let me please invite my colleague, Dr. Ana Midžić, to share with us some of the highlights from the report and the strategy going forward. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Washington. Welcome, everyone. It's a huge pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to present the highlights from our report, which, as Washington said, summarizes the work we have done in the last 10 years as a center and also highlights our vision for 2030. So I would like to start with putting the center as a part of the global innovation system. We have been working for 10 years now with many industry partners and research sponsors to build the capacity and promote the uptake of systems approaches in construction and infrastructure. And this is my first thanks for the evening to people that we have been working very closely over the years, so our core members, but also the range of institutions that have been part of this, what we would argue, relatively successful journey. The second thanks goes to the people that made the center what it is. Now we have been working with many academics, primarily from the civil and environmental engineering department at Imperial, PhD students, postdocs, but also with the staff across the college. And you see most of them here, and this is a huge thanks to them also for making the center the way it is. And just to start the story from the very beginning, the center was founded in 2010 by Len O'Rourke and Professor David Fisk, who is with us today, was the first director of the center. In the first 5 years, the center was primarily focused on education. We have founded our MSc in Systems Engineering and Innovation, and it was also the period where academic staff has started collaboration with LENGO work. And then in 2015, Professor Jennifer White has joined the center as director. The collaboration with the Royal Academy of Engineering has started, and during that period, the focus has transitioned towards research. We had new industry members joining us, Bentley Systems, Mott MacDonald, Project Production Institute, and EDF. And during that period, we have worked very closely with the industry and using the yearly showcase events as an opportunity to get together, talk about our work, and have keynote speakers such as Dame Judith Hackett. Then in 2012, the world has changed. Our work has changed. For the center, this was the new period with me joining as a co-director and Professor Washington Cheng joining as an executive director. We have moved to online working, and we have also celebrated the 10 years in July last year, which was, for some of you who were there, a very successful event. But maybe more importantly, we have used this time to think about the future. And from these discussions which led to the event, this report has resulted. And where I would like to start the highlights from this report is really starting with the vision for where we want to take our research in the next 10 years, which has two high-level focuses. So the first one is broadening the scope from looking a lot at the construction sector in the first 10 years to moving towards the cross-infrastructure challenges, and I'm sure we'll touch upon these in the later discussion. And the second element is looking at the aspects which include resilience and safety and sustainability, and how systems approaches can be applied. How we are taking that agenda forward is through our 6 themes, which you can see explained in the detail in the report. The themes are enabling us to structure our thinking around the context in which we want to look the future infrastructure. And this context is direct response to the societal challenges globally, but also which are the focus of the UK government. So the first one is around the need to address climate crisis, environmental degradation, which is in line with the UK commitment to go towards net zero carbon by 2050. The second one is really looking into infrastructure, not only as providing the services for people, but also as a close and interlinked part of the natural environment. And the third element, which is important for taking the work forward for us, is thinking about the infrastructure system as in the life cycle context of thinking about the construction, but also thinking about the use, operation, and how we create the information to make best decisions. So where is that taking us? We would like to test our thinking by proposing a systems process which links all of these themes that you see here. And we propose 3 aspects around that system process. So first one is around the envisioning. So if we want to move from where we are into a better future, we need to decide, or we need to co-create the vision of that better future. We see that vision as the vision of the built and natural environment closely interlinked. And we propose the concept of zero pollution infrastructure, which I will explain briefly what we mean by that. But then if we have that vision, then we need to decide how we move from where we are to achieve that vision. And here we propose to use models and data to evaluate the performance of our existing systems with the aim to first understand where we are, to understand why things
Anna, I think we've lost you for a moment. Hopefully we can get you back. I mean, just while we're waiting for Anna, just to give her a minute to come back, Jenny's put a link in the chat to the report that we're launching, and so please do have a look at the report. We'll give Anna a moment to come back and just finish the slides, and then we'll move into the panel discussion and the question and answer session. Okay, so what I suggest we do is that we start the panel discussion, and then unless Anna's just back, so it looks like Anna's just. Oh, okay. So Tim, you're putting the slides up. So what I suggest that we do is that we move into the panel discussion, and Anna can go through the rest of the slides when she rejoins us. But I would like to introduce the two panelists who are going to join us in discussing the report, and just to let them say a few words at the beginning, and then we'll move into a bit of a panel discussion and into some questions and answers. So if I could introduce first Alan Penn and then Dragan Savic. So Alan, perhaps you could just say a few words about who you are and your reflection on the report, and then hand over to Dragan.
Okay, I will. Thanks very much, Jennifer. I was actually thinking on doing this that you've realised what your age is when something you thought happened just a couple of years ago turns out to have happened 10 years ago. And I remember the centre being set up and David establishing this with great applause. And goodness me, how doesn't time fly? So the report itself, fantastic. I must say that going through it, I think you've trodden a very careful line between something that is erudite and academic and something that's absolutely about real world application. I wanted to make one point actually, which is that it's out of this last year's experience, a year since lockdown today, and during that period we've had SAGE operating. Now, SAGE has a whole group of people involved in it, many, countless people, but chief amongst these have been the epidemiologists. And the epidemiologists, including those from Imperial, who have been absolutely instrumental in running their models. And those models have then charted what may happen next, and allowed different scenarios to be forecast from those models. This has been incredibly important in policy terms. All policies have actually been defined on the basis of these models. It makes me think that in the field of the other crisis, the climate change crisis, which is here already and certainly coming in increasing force between now and 2050, we need modeling. And those models are going to be much more complex than epidemiological models. We're not talking about a single virus that transmits in complicated ways amongst many different people. We're talking about whole systems and systems of systems, and they involve people with beliefs and ideologies and markets and institutions. And all of those feedback loops that Melvin Webber spoke of as giving rise to wicked problems. This is going to be something in which the sort of systems dynamic modeling that you're describing and that you've been developing in the centre is going to come into its own. But for it to have policy impact, these models need to be able to be turned to the questions that our decision takers in government and everywhere else actually are going to be asking. And those are that's going to be a real test actually. Can we get as good as the epidemiologists in bringing these models to bear on policy? And I think that's a challenge for you for for your 2030 vision. But I think you're incredibly well set up to be doing that. And so congratulations on the report in the last 10 years.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to hand straight over to Dragan Savic just to say a few introductory comments.
Thank you very much. And it's such a pleasure to join you here today to celebrate your 10th anniversary, but also, to look into the future. And it's very difficult to follow after Alan because he's touched upon all the key points. Future is going to be very uncertain. And I don't need to point to the last year just to see what is in the bag for us. There is lots of that deep uncertainty about the future. The infrastructure, and be it transport, water, telecommunications, are the backbone of the society. I'm always reminded that at the turn of the century, the doctors of the British Medical Journal voted water and sanitation as the best innovation of the 20th century. It wasn't vaccines, it wasn't surgical procedures, transplants. It was water and sanitation. So infrastructure again. So, to have a center that focuses on infrastructure engineering and innovation is what we really need to underpin policy making, looking into various parts of our society that hold different views about where the investment should be, what our future infrastructure should like. Is it going to be centralized or decentralized or hybrid? How do we achieve resilience and sustainability or improve sustainability? And finally, I'd like to go back to that British Medical Journal kind of outcome, which really surprised me. And that's that infrastructure is related to health. Think about mental, physical health in much wider sense. So I'll finish at that and congratulate you once again on scintillating successes so far and wish you even more so in the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dragan. So I'm going to suggest to people that if you want to, please do put your video on. We've made a decision not to do this as a webinar and to do it as a meeting because we had a really nice experience of talking to the London Cities and Guilds, and they all had their cameras on, and it was nice to be able to interact in a slightly more personal way with the audience. And so please do feel free to put your camera on and to be visible to each other, and because this is really about growing a community that can work together around some of these big challenges that we face. And in the absence of Anna, and Anna, please do let me know if someone let me know if
I'm back. I'm so
you're back.
sorry.
Okay.
My internet crashed, which is we can talk about the resilience. But,
okay.
Sorry about.
So I'm going to suggest that Anna, you in Washington represent the centre, and David, you chip in if you want to. I'm going to continue to go through some questions, and then Anna, maybe in the answer to one of those, you can continue. You can show some of the rest of the presentation. But I would like to get us into the interactive part of this. Really by asking a question to anyone on the panel around this transition to net zero. So I think Alan started us thinking about modelling and the difficulties of addressing some of these big challenges. But Anna, maybe you could kind of kick us off just thinking about, what the research challenges are going to be around this topic of net zero. I know industry is very interested in it, tends to be thinking about carbon. What do you see as the big challenges for us moving forward?
So I did plan to cover that in the slides. So maybe I think I just talk rather than sharing slides again. But maybe just to explain our thinking, which again you can see in the report under the carbon neutral to zero pollution theme, and that was really our thinking. I think about the net zero concept in two ways. So the first one is, if we think about carbon only, are we actually missing the opportunity to look at the broader scope of the link between the infrastructure and the development? And I think the second one is really that environmental impact and the trade-off between the local and global, but also how we define targets for the net zero development, because the concept of net zero in the context of carbon is saying we have our activities and then we pollute, but we will offset that with technologies, behavior changes, so on. However, that concept on its own doesn't set any limits to development, which we may want to think about, thinking about the broader natural environment. And then for us, I think the zero pollution concept is from that perspective a bit more comprehensive. And what we are suggesting is to use the environmental indicators as a way of setting maybe more ambitious targets for the future development, and use the environmental indicators to inform the infrastructure performance and development. And I can definitely maybe later on give some examples from the water sector, but similar thinking would apply linked to air quality, water quality, and so on.
So maybe we could go back to Alan on that. So Alan, I think we're all very interested in your analogy with modelling of COVID and of the vaccine, of the spread of COVID. And I wonder, you know, as you say, this is a more complex set of problems. How do you think? What strategies do you think are going to be useful for informing policy in this sort of area?
So I would forecast that we're going to get some large and comprehensive models based on data about the physical built environment and infrastructure and natural environment, which all are changing all the time. But we do now have the ability to capture those data, to put them into, if you like, comprehensive digital models, and to use those to begin to ask some what-if questions. So we understand a lot about the interactions that take place, but not necessarily about when things will happen. And this is always the difficult thing. We know there are going to be disasters. Just predicting when they will happen is always the difficult question. But what I do see potentially coming out of this are sort of very direct questions about retrofitting. Let's see how do we retrofit the built environment to reduce energy demand to the point at which the green electricity supply will be able to cope, hopefully to the point at which the infrastructure won't need entirely replacing in order to carry the electricity loads of green electricity. And just what are the measures that you need to take first? Because there's a very short time between now and 2050. You know, we've got whatever it is, 23 million houses or homes in the UK. To retrofit all of those, well, we've got to start tomorrow, and we've got to be doing 10,000 a week, and that actually sets in context the scale of the challenge. So that's a sort of form of question where modelling is really important, to be able to say what to do first, what to prioritize, and what to put off for 15 years, because new technologies will come in that period.
Thanks, Alan. So there's one question that I would really like to ask Dragan and yourself before I open the floor to questions, and I will open the floor to questions both on chat and if people want to put their hand up to ask a question in person. But I would really like to ask perhaps Dragan first and then yourself, Alan, about impact. So, you know, one thing that we've tried to do in this centre is to do, you know, high quality, globally leading research, but then also to have an impact and to impact our industry partners and also government policy. And I wondered if I could ask each of you in turn, you know, as our visitors, who were chosen because of your connections across this landscape, perhaps to reflect on how this work that we've been progressing to date and our ambitions for the future can have impact on industry and policy.
Well, very, very difficult question, Jennifer. It's how do we bridge that gap between research and policy and impact on policy? That's what we're talking here. And I think the only thing we can do that is through partnerships and through co-creation. Through all my kind of experience over the past 30 years in this field, looking at problems, at systematic system problems through system perspective, you get to a situation, if you develop something without the end user being involved in co-development of it, it's usually not being used. They're not interested, decision makers. So that would be my first kind of suggestion, is engagement. Get them engaged from the day one. That's the first thing. And then see, Alan, again, I think he touched upon this prioritization. And one thing is prioritizing investment and where you're going, but you need to prioritize the research as well. That research that is timely and with highest possible impact on the society. So in that sense, that I also have to show my frustration here with the users or practitioners. Whenever I tried to work with them, for them to express their challenges and how the systems approach can help them do that, it was complete silence. Or they would come up with something that I didn't understand at all. So language, partnerships, personal relationships as well, in order to convince these people that you have the capacity to do that, and then engage them in the development of these decision support models or systems models. So I'm afraid lots of kind of pent up frustration here, but you know, there are lots of opportunities as well.
Yeah, and I hope we have some good examples of that in the report itself. And I saw Chris Millard was here, and maybe I'll ask him to comment on you know, on our interaction and our engagement through the last 5 years. Perhaps Alan, do you want to just reflect quickly on that? Yeah.
So I was really impressed with your report, which of course has everything in it, as those sorts of 10-year reports need to have. I must say that I think you were remarkably fortunate in your prime industrial partner. I think Laing O'Rourke have been inspirational, and in the industry, you got the one tier one that is actually really forward-looking. And I think that's probably been remarkably fortunate, probably all by plan, but you've had a good run there. Now, what I would say is that if you want to have impact, I think there are various ways you do it, and you point to some of them. So you've got alumni, you know, starting off with the education. You've actually got a lot of people out there now in industry, in government, in various places, who have been through the what is the systems thinking, and that's incredibly influential in the long term. I think it's a slow burn, but it's a very important one. The second is you've been doing the research, and so I was very much captivated by each of your sections saying, what's the problem, what have we done, what have we found, what impact does that have, what's the possibility? And I think that's a very nice structure to the report, but it shows that you've taken a very overarching and strategic view about the domain in a way that actually I think there are few players in the world able to do. And so I think that's really impressive, truly impressive. The third thing, it seems to me, is around leadership, and it's about setting a vision. So one of the problems with the climate change kind of challenge, the net zero by 2050, is people are just waking up to it, and they're already saying, but it's too late. Now, I think actually what you've got is a real responsibility to tell people, no, it's not too late. If you look at it this way, we can work our way through it. and to show real intellectual leadership and vision, because I don't think that that's going to come from anywhere else. I think intellectual leadership and vision about this is a solvable problem, a tractable problem, and that if we don't all do our part, then we will fail, but the consequences of that are unthinkable. And so I think there's a responsibility here to get that vision sold. And I think that is the one thing that would have the most impact of all at the current juncture.
Alan, I think at that point, I'm going to hand back to Anna. And Anna, if you want to put your slides up or to say a couple of things about the end of your presentation, then this would be a good time to do it. And then I'm going to open the floor to wider questions and maybe bring in a couple of people from the advisory board. I can see people like Adam Locke on the line.
Thanks, Jennifer. So I'm just going to quickly finish what I have started. I think we have left it here around the parts where how we can show that the things are possible. We do again propose the vision around the zero pollution evaluation using the models, and then integration from the perspective of people, also data models, but also construction and operation. So I'll just show visually what we were thinking when I'm thinking around the difference between the net zero and zero pollution. And this is what I was mentioning around our built environment, our activities, but also then the link with the environmental targets and being a bit more ambitious in achieving the sustainable development, but also having the future proofing of the infrastructure systems. On the evaluating, I wanted to mention a few examples of our collaboration with the industry over the years. In the report, you see the example of the Langor case study, and why this example is interesting to us is because it touches upon the digital innovation, which is an important part of the center's work. It links with our discussions that we have around infrastructure digital twin, and that is something we can touch upon maybe in the discussion later on. But equally around the infrastructure, seeing as a system of system and interacting with the environment, one of the things we can take forward, and we have some ideas and solutions, are covering the work that we do in the civil and environmental engineering in various sections. So we are doing a lot of work on sustainable materials in our material section, which is important for the construction industry. Professor Washington Cheng is with us today, and his team in the transport section that do great work on zero pollution in that sector. Of course, there are people in looking at the water neutrality and how we take forward the water infrastructure, both in the urban scale and the catchment scale. And we also have a great team in our fluid section looking at the low energy buildings. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, we do collaborate across the college as well. And we have a really good relationship, for example, with the Dyson School for Design Engineering, looking at the design flexibility. So all of these elements we see as an element and building blocks of that solution that we may create together. And then finally, something which is probably close to Alan's heart is around linking and supporting the policy. We were fortunate to have Nadim Zahawi, which was the minister at that time for construction, when we had our 10-year celebration report, who emphasized the need for systems approaches. And few things that we have been involved as a part of the center is the work on the construction playbook that Jennifer was involved. Some of my recent work with the Environment Agency around developing systems approaches for catchment water management, and this report is currently in print. And then finally, something we may also maybe talk about a bit about is what we want to do next in that policy remit. I had a nice discussion with Alan around if we want to try to test policy at the systems level and what that may mean. But something that we can definitely can take forward from this report. And this is the last slide, which is just saying that the part of something maybe that Dragan mentioned around collaboration and partnerships, that we are definitely not alone on this journey, and we are happy we are not alone. At Imperial, our work is closely linked with the Transition to Zero Pollution initiative, which is the part of our 2025 academic strategy, and we are also closely collaborating with other systems researchers at Imperial. And then, of course, from the industry side, it was mentioned that we have really key industry partners. So these are our current partners, Langer O'Rourke, Bentley Systems, BPI, and EDF. And we are really hoping to increase the scope and get other industry partners to join us. And then, of course, through other organizations we are collaborating with through our advisory board, such as Royal Academy of Engineering, UCRIC, and Resilient Shift. And then finally, recognizing the role of government and working with them to create, I guess, the systems community, which will create a change. So this is where I was planning to finish my presentation. It is really an invitation to join us, and we'll mention at the end the ways to get involved. But the vision is around zero pollution. The aim is to use systems approaches, and we would like to work with the community to get there together. So I'll stop sharing, and I guess we can go back to panel discussion now.
Thanks, Anna. I mean, I think it was worth us just pausing for a minute and having a look at that, those final slides, and really just to celebrate the work that we've done to date, to share with you our ambitious research agenda to 2030, and now to move into a session where we can get your comments and feedback on the report and on the discussion that we've been having to date in this session, and also to get your input to help us shape these agendas as we go forward, and to come with us on that journey. I would like to kind of open the floor to questions, and I think if you're happy to speak, you can put your hand up on the participant list. If you would like me to say your question, then if you put it in chat, then I can speak it for you. I can see a question from John Pelton in chat. John, shall I ask your question? So there's a question from John, and I may be missing some of the questions earlier, and I'm sort of trying to scroll back and have a look, but if I miss your question, then please do feel free to prompt me. So a question from John: given the high carbon cost of major infrastructure assets, would it be appropriate for the net zero systems to be extended to include economic solutions such as trading and carbon offsets? Anna, do you want to respond to that, or shall I ask Alan?
It's a really difficult question. Well, I think my response would be that we need all possible solutions to be put and try to see how they work together. One thing that I would probably be emphasizing is also if we are looking at the range of options that we may want to use for carbon offsetting, for any pollution offsetting, which can include policy, technology, behavior change, economic modules, and as well. I think one thing we need to have the mechanisms is to test any possible unintended consequences, because we have seen that happening so far. I think the big question is something we are discussing a lot in the center is why, because we have lots of ideas. We know that things that work, we have technology, we have solutions, but we are still not getting there. And the answer very often comes to the point that what we are missing are some unintended consequences, or some feedbacks that are happening beyond the core system that you're looking at. So I would say definitely yes, but I would also say we need mechanisms. And again, I always talk about models because I'm a modeler, but it's also around the data and integration of information, which will enable us to check if we, say, introduce the economic incentive, will there be anything else that will happen within the system which will make the overall situation worse?
Yeah.
Can I come in on that? I mean, I do think one of the things you've got in your centre is that you bridge over between different technologies. So you've got people who are, if you like, civil engineers, and you've got people who are computational. And one of the key aspects of this question about trading in carbon offsets is to do with trust, and to do with whether you can verify that the carbon you're offsetting has actually been offset. And that's where new technologies and distributed ledger systems and other sorts of systems of that kind, cryptographic systems to ensure that you don't defraud, all come to bear. So I think that in the coming years, it's one of the areas where we will see a lot of advance, and it will be really important, because if you can harness an economy to decarbonize, that's a very rapid way of accelerating innovation in a system. And I think that's exactly the sort of thing that will be needed.
I'm seeing a question in the chat about the value of being a partner or a member of the centre, and I think Jenny, you might respond individually to the person, but perhaps someone from our advisory boards, Adam, maybe if you could say a few words about the engagement that you've had with us as a centre and how we've worked together. And that might be kind of helpful. I don't know if Adam, if I could persuade you to say a few words. There's a case study of our engagement with Laing O'Rourke in the report.
Yeah, so thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, panel. I think the short answer is that, you know, it's only through engagement and collaboration that you can actually really make any progress. So I think that's the first point. I think the second point is that, you know, having a couple of meetings doesn't get you there. So it's about sustained collaboration and working together. And actually, you know, you probably need to go through that learning cycle of you know, not quite achieving what you want to achieve, and then understanding from that, and then learning. So you know, it's a sort of cliche, but it is a journey, and a long journey. But I think the prize at the end, in terms of the impact that we're talking about, zero pollution, I think is big enough to warrant that. And I think the one thing that is abundantly clear is that, you know, no one constituency, be that in academia or in industry, has got all the answers. So you know, and I think this is the real challenge and opportunity, you know, particularly in this very connected system of systems, you know, around pollution and the global environment. It's very, very interrelated. So I think you know, certainly from me, one of the fundamental building blocks is around, you know, what is practical to achieve. And you know, there's analogies of eating elephants and all the rest of it, but actually, and I think that's where systems engineering approach can start helping you. You know, how can we sort of look probably, you know, at two scales? One is, you know, at the macro scale, what are the big things that if we influence, even if we haven't got all the perfect data environment available to make decisions, can we use some sort of modeling and understanding sensitivity to say where are the big handfuls that we need to be aiming at? That's the sort of top-down approach. And then there's clearly the bottom-up approach, which is, you know, what are the practical steps that we can do to sort of implement progressive change and progressive development. And I think certainly for us, the combination of digital and a kind of modular DFMA sort of approach sort of tries to take this Leviathan, not just an elephant, but this massive sea monster of the environment, and try and deal with it in sort of more digestible chunks. And I think that's really the trick, is how can we continue to work together to sort of focus on, you know, things that can add value and be implementable, but also take us in a direction that we want to go. And it's hard. It is really hard, but and we won't get it right all the time. But it's a classic case of you don't unless you try, you'll never get there. So for me, I don't think it's an option. I think we have to do it, and we have to work together. And the prize is sufficiently meaningful to make it absolutely worthwhile. And if we can, be doing it in a smart way so that we're really adding value at every step, for me, that's the real advantage about industry and academia working together in collaboration.
Thanks, Adam. I think it's very helpful to hear hear from your perspective in terms of working with us. I have a question here from Ken Allison.
Hi, thank you, Jennifer. Spotting my hand. Yeah, I'm Ken Allison. I'm a director with the Environment Agency, and most of my role involves flood management. And I was sent your report by a friend of mine who thought I might have some spare time this afternoon. And I read it thinking I didn't, but then I thought, no, I ought to join really and listen. I wanted to ask a question because I read your report, which I do actually think is excellent. I don't read a lot of academic material these days, unfortunately, but I thought the blend of academic and practical language was spot on, to the point where I think I understand it. And the reason I wanted to ask a question was because in the report, you make reference to net zero, the carbon challenge. Now, in my role with my colleagues, we're wrestling with the I'll call it the dual challenge of the climate emergency, which is how to get to net zero, but how to adapt as well. Given that whether or not we get to net zero, we're still going to have to adapt around the world. So I think everybody knows this. We're expecting more droughts and more floods and all the awful consequences of that. And one of the challenges we're wrestling with, and it can get quite emotional actually, is yes, we could get to net zero by doing an awful lot less. But what we actually need in terms of adaptation is to do an awful lot more. Whether it's how to deal with the consequences that they're facing in Java, or the fact that we're going to need to build a bigger, longer Thames barrier in a few decades. One of thousands of examples around the world. And what the question I was coming to really was, given your focus on systems and integrated thinking, how do you see your, and I do think from the report, what is an excellent centre, how do you see your centre as helping us face this challenge as to how to adapt the planet whilst also dealing with net zero? Thank you.
I'm not sure there's going to be an easy answer to that one, Ken. I mean,
no, I'm sure there isn't.
I mean, I can say that one thing that I've been thinking of, and I'll hand over to Anna in a sec to get her reflection. But one thing we started to think about was to think about projects. So to think about construction projects as interventions into bigger systems, and that may be obvious to you sitting in the Environment Agency, but in parts of the literature, projects are still dealt with as in splendid isolation. And I think that we really have to see projects as interventions into that bigger system so that we can start to address the questions that you're asking about adaptation and net zero. Anna, do you want to reflect on that? And if Alan wants to chip in, then I'll also Alan. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's an excellent question and something we are thinking a lot. And I think it maybe comes to that point, which I mentioned in the presentation around the maximizing the use of the existing systems. And I think this is something really that we maybe need to think a bit more on, where we are, how we can delay maybe the building and using land or land that we can use normally for maybe flood protection, to use it for construction, and hence we change, say, water cycle and make the things worse. I think this is one thing. And the second one, and maybe Dragan can also comment about that, is thinking about the adaptation really as a process that we may not need to have all the answers at the moment, but to have tools and methods that we can scope the range of possible futures and then go in the adaptation step by step. Because the uncertainty as we go in the future is increasing, and our investments and our thinking, and I think we are typically in engineering, we would say we want a robust solution which will cover all the possible futures in 50 years. And with the complexity of the system, that is very difficult to do at the moment. So one way of thinking about it is to say, well, I will simulate the system for 100 years. I will look at the possible options, but I will plan for 5 years because my uncertainty is relatively low. But I will think about the flexibility in the design so that I can add other elements if the situation gets worse, or maybe situation will get better, and then I can do something else. But preparing the infrastructure system to be very flexible in the adaptation, I think, will be very key. I think it's a quite difficult challenge for us, but that's what the engineering is for.
So I can give an example.
Yeah.
And it's in the field of buildings and building heating. So in this country, we're very used to having central heating, burning gas to keep us warm in winter. But as climate change happens, actually overheating in summer is going to become a problem. We're going to end up with people dying because of excess overheating in summer overheating periods, like 2003, I think it was. There was a very nasty European heat wave. And that has an implication. So one of the big attractive things about going over from gas boilers to electric heat pumps is that you can design them to run to cool as well as to heat. And so it's an interesting approach to both a reduction in greenhouse gas and to resilience in the face of climate change, which is happening anyway. So I think these sorts of finding systems which serve more than one purpose are going to be all important. We can't just rely on our historic ways of doing things.
And I think there are questions there, Ken, that help to shape our journey. And it may be a conversation that we should continue to have, especially as I know Anna is got some new grants in this area working on water and its relationship with the built environment.
Jennifer, sorry, could I just say, may I just respond very briefly?
Yeah.
One of my fears here is that the psychology that comes to play here when we start talking about adaptation translates into delay.
Yeah.
And yet we see a risk that's, well, a problem that's accelerating towards us. Yeah, but thank you very much.
I think you're absolutely right. And this is where I think the sort of intellectual leadership that the centre can provide will be really important, because there is no excuse for delaying. We've got to start now. We can't wait for a magic technology to come that's going to solve it all in 5 years' time. It'll be too late.
It won't be just technology.
Getting that point through is, I think, really important.
Sorry, I thought you finished, Alan. I was just going to say, and it's not just the technology. Being a technologist myself, I would normally approach the problem only from the technology point of view. How we best design our flood defenses, or what is the best possible way to plan for all the eventualities. but we need to get other disciplines involved. Psychology, behavior analysis. How do we convince people? What is the nudge effect? Do we gamify everything to try to do that, Ken, so that people do not feel, oh, that's going to happen maybe in 50 years' time, I won't be affected?
But I can just maybe make a quick comment for what we're saying. And I think this is maybe a link with what we are discussing a lot in the kind of how we move post-COVID. Post-COVID has become almost a word. And I think and lots of people talk about it, if we've learned anything from COVID, is that the change can happen quickly if there is an, well, I mean, there is a level of urgency, which is imminent and danger as it is with the COVID. But I think what Dragan was mentioning around using some ways of sharing the information, games and so on, to really show the possible things that may happen because we are dealing with climate change and the pressures, which again may incentivize people to react just because something is highly likely, not exactly when these things happen. So I think there is a value of sharing the information and education and really going there and maybe running the quite catastrophic scenarios just to see what might happen.
Can I ask Alan, please, the UK government's perspective on this? Talking to governments around the globe, the UK government is being seen as taking a leading role. What is the current status, the thinking within the UK government, and what can we do to help them?
Okay, so I'm going to answer in a personal capacity here because I can't speak for the UK government as a whole. What I would say is that the 2050 net zero goal, which is in legislation, is actually real leadership. And I think this government is very much committed to tackling the challenge. This actually relates to Stefan's question in the chat, which is, are past greenhouse gas emissions taken into account when necessary steps towards a net zero are assessed? To the best of my knowledge, they're not, Stefan. There's maybe a moral imperative in this, and I hope that one of the reasons why this government is doing that is that we sort of kicked off the Industrial Revolution by burning coal and have probably produced more greenhouse gas than an awful lot over that past history. But I think that government is taking this very seriously. We are lined up for COP26 in Glasgow this year, the end of the year. That's a real opportunity to show international leadership around this area. What I can say is that I joined my department about 18 months ago, and there's been a substantial shift in Westminster, in Whitehall, let's say, over that last 18 months towards taking this whole set of challenges much more seriously and much more centrally in policy. People are now really taking charge of this. I hope it's not too late, but it's certainly something which is moving up the agenda.
So I have a question on chat, and I can also see Adam has his hand raised. So my first question, which is on chat, is from Ed Pound. Ed, do you want to say it, or shall I? I'll just read it. Shall I? Yeah. So
sure, you can read it, and then I can follow up.
Yeah. And so it's really a question about being smart about this. And I think it's a good question, Ed, and it's something that we talk to our advisory board about quite a lot, right? How can you be smart about long-term research, but also have impact on industry today, I think is sort of your question, right? So
right.
About achieving those long-term goals, but then also delivering to existing projects and existing initiatives and ongoing work. And I hope I won't embarrass my colleague, Dr. Ranjit Soman, if I say that I think his work is a good example of that. Looking at constraints on a construction site and now beginning to implement that work with practitioners that we're working with. And so, I think that we do engage to have impact today, and also to have impact in ways that then shape the world that we're moving into. Adam, you have your hand up. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't find on Zoom the particular thing to raise your hand. I can clap hands, but not raise apparently from the selection. But it's a bit sad after a year's anniversary of Zoom meetings that I still can't do that. I have to confess we do more of our stuff on Teams, but I think just sort of reacting, I suppose, and building on the sort of previous points around the urgency and then Ed's point around how do we be smart about this? And I think this is where the kind of hopefully we can almost practice what we preach in the sort of systems engineering environment to actually help us start to answer that question. And I think, Jennifer, your idea and terminology around interventions, I think, is really helpful, because at the bottom line, it's what can I do? Where I'm sitting here today now, actually, what's the thing that I can do differently in terms of the way I push forward on whatever project it is or whatever sphere I'm working on. And I think ultimately it does come back to the collective of all those small individual actions. And I think back to the smart point, and I think this is where we need the input from the Centre for Systems Engineering is, how do we organize that? It's that classic thing of, you can play all the right notes, not necessarily in the right order. The trick is to try and get the right notes in the right order. But at the same time, not being kind of letting, to get another metaphor in there, not letting perfection be the enemy of the good. So I think, how do we take some interventions, sort of see the impact, and I think that's the key thing, be able to kind of measure the impact, feed that back into the bigger picture of if everybody did that, what would the implication be? And I think this is the real opportunity to kind of bridge that gap between what I can do now and what the long-term example is. I think this intervention idea is a really useful one, because it comes back down to the actual building block of what can I do, and then you can build up the picture, and that's where the sort of systems engineering comes in, and we can start prioritizing. And for me, that's what we've got up for grabs in the centre here, in terms of the combined capabilities of everybody that's involved.
Yeah, and I think the centre has an opportunity, because this systems perspective is beginning to become more recognised in the policy landscape around. The Royal Academy of Engineering is talking about it. The Institution of Civil Engineers is talking about it. We're going to run our systems engineering leadership short course again in June, and I can see some people on the call who've done that in the past. But I think that's been a really useful way of giving practitioners an opportunity to take that systems engineering thinking into their own practice. So I'm going to begin to draw this to a close. So if there are any final questions from the floor, let's take them now. I'm not seeing any on the chat. I might just give David and Washington an opportunity, and Nick, if you want it, an opportunity to reflect on the discussion that we've had. And then I will hand over to Anna to say some final comments, unless there are any final questions coming through. David, can I hand over to you?
Oh yeah, I just very much appreciate the contribution everyone has made, actually. this is an area that's just going to keep moving, and it's moving into completely new areas that I don't think 20 years ago we could have conceived were going to happen. So really exciting time.
Thanks, David. And I know you're continuing to make real contributions to this through your role in the National Infrastructure Commission, and I'm sure a lot of the debate's sort of interesting to some of those connections in policy. Washington.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jennifer. I would just like to echo David as well in thanking everybody who has attended today. Thanks to our partners that have been working with us, and also thank you to those who will be joining us in advance. I just wanted to say that the hyper complexity of what we are dealing with here calls upon tools, and I think Alan made the point about tools, models and tools that allow us to understand the many variables that are actually involved in this equation. And I think without that, it's going to be difficult. So systems thinking is required, obviously, but we also need to train people who understand hypercomplex systems, because the threat landscape is huge. There are so many things coming together in different ways. So it was quite interesting to hear Alan say something about that. Dragan also mentioned partnership, engagement, and so on. I mean, we are all in it together. So I think it's a no-brainer that we need to come together if we're going to make a significant difference. Imperial College, as a college, is looking very seriously at societal resilience, defined, as basically trying to preserve the planet, or at least make sure that we can retrofit some of the terrible things we have actually done, particularly infrastructurally. I remember David Fisk mentioning a while ago that why is it that most of the infrastructure that we've acquired to date, there are lots of things wrong with it. They are expensive, they are late, and so on and so forth. We have a lot of things actually to retrofit, to think about solving now, let alone the future. So I think, for me, beginning to actually put those elements of the jigsaw together, which systems engineering allows you to do, is the beginning of getting somewhere to potentially resolve some of those issues. So from my position as executive director of the center, mine is to invite you to come, bring whatever you can bring to the party, and let's really get together and make a big difference in this particular area of work. So thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting you and collaborating with you going forward.
Nick.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think the first 10 years of the centre have been a great success. We are very grateful to Laing O'Rourke for their continued support. I think Alan mentioned that he thought we'd been lucky to team up with Laing O'Rourke, bearing in mind the long-sightedness that they have, but actually we weren't lucky in that sense. They came to us and asked us to develop a centre, and that was really just another element of their long-term vision. So we really appreciate that. I would also like to say thank you very much to David and Jennifer again for each leading the centre for 5 years, and for Anna now stepping in to take a major role in its direction as well. I thought it was a great report too. One doesn't like to praise one's own institution output too much. I wasn't involved very much in preparing the report, but I think it's one of the few reports of its kind that I might keep rather than put in a box and completely forget. I think the future of the centre looks bright, particularly if we work together. And so I think the centre provides a vehicle for doing that. And I would encourage those listening to seriously consider, if not already involved, how you might get involved. And I'm sure Anna and Jennifer will be very happy to tell you about the different models for doing that if you'd like to contact them. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'll hand over to Anna to have the last word.
Thanks, Jennifer. I guess at the end, there are just a few things for me to say. I think the first one is that hopefully this will inspire you to go back and have a look at the details in the report. We did put lots of thought in putting it together. And we also hope that this event today helped you understand where we are going next. And I think the overall message from all of us in the Center for Systems Engineering and Innovation is that we are very ambitious, but we also need your help and your support to do this together. So for me, at the end, I would just like to do a few thanks to finish the event. I think the first thanks is to Dragan and Alan for joining us today and for amazing discussion. We greatly appreciate your time, and I'm sure people are doing the virtual clapping. we can't do the proper one in this situation, but we are very grateful for your time and commitment. And then I would like to thank and mention specifically Jennifer and David. The center wouldn't exist if it wasn't for them. And they are still very much involved with the work, and they are huge support for me together with Washington in taking this role, which is a very new role for me. So thank you officially very much, all of you. And I think the final thanks from me is to Jenny and Tim. So these are the two people that are behind everything we do, which make things function, which makes us do things on time. So I see Jenny, I don't see Tim. But Tim, if you want to just switch your camera on, and a big thanks to both of you. So just
Thank you, Anna.
Finally, where we would like to end is really thanking all the participants for joining us. We see quite a large number of you being with us for this hour and a half. We do hope you enjoyed it. There are a couple of ways that you can get in touch with us. Jenny is putting in the chat the link where you can see our Get Involved page, where you can see the details, but you can also email Jenny directly. So Jenny has the role of the Research and Engagement Manager and will help you get in touch with us and all the other staff in the department and the college, which are linked to our agenda. And I think the final thing for me to say is that we would like to get a bit of feedback from you on this event. So Jenny will be putting the link to the feedback form in the chat and also in the follow-up email. So if you would find a few minutes to complete that and let us know how we can improve these types of events, maybe things that we can take forward, that would be completely amazing. So this is all from us for today. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks to the whole CSEI team and members and advisors. We hope to see you at some of the future events and wish you a very nice end of the day. Thank you and bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye all. Well done.